Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll move on to number 4, public appearances, public's opportunity to speak. We don't have anyone in the room, but if there's anyone on Zoom that would like to give public comments, I see no one. So we're going to move on to number 5, which is discuss and consider the minutes from the Plan Commission meeting on July 15th, 2026.
Motion to approve is presented.
Second.
Motion by Alex, second by Heidi. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Number 6, continued discussion of potential ordinance amendment related to the use of bird safety glazing in future buildings. We've had presentations on this and some discussion at past meetings, and the direction from the previous meeting was to maybe have a little bit more information about the impact to developers by incorporating an ordinance like this into our code. Turn it over to Aaron.
Thanks. So as I think I mentioned last time, we're going to pick a local example of a recently built building in the village and kind of take a look at how this ordinance would have affected that. So this is First Choice Dental. The areas highlighted in red are areas that would be subject to the ordinance because they're more than 50 square feet. So as far as what that would be likely to cost, let me find my notes here. So the estimates on the cost of the kind of storefront glazing per square foot vary quite a bit, from about $50 to $150 dollars a square foot. Kind of splitting the difference and calling it 100, this would be about a $56,000 worth of storefront glass. The bird glazing tends to be 2 to 4 times the cost of regular glass, kind of depending what you do. The lower end, it's like an etched design that the birds can see. The higher end, it's more of a UV thing that there's a pattern that the birds can see, but people can't. So if we're assuming it's twice the amount, that's an extra, roughly $60,000. You wouldn't have to replace all of it per the ordinance, just 0.85 or 85%. So about an extra $50,000 on the project. Per the building permit, this was a little over $1 million project in total, so it's adding about 5% to the cost of the building in this example. However, that's also not the only way to meet the ordinance, is to put the bird glass in. For one thing, this building was 10,013 square feet. And the ordinance is for buildings 10,000 square feet and over. So in this case, if they could have trimmed 14 square feet out of the building, they wouldn't have had to meet the ordinance at all. They can also do things with the design of the glazing to break down the total the size of the area. So if there's a mullion that's more than 6 inches, then that separates it into 2 different areas. So in this case, where it was one larger piece of glass because it used 2-inch mullions in the actual building. And here, if they made this cross mullion 6 inches, then it's a 30-foot and a 42-foot square foot area. And they would not have to put the bird glass in this area. I think it would still have benefits for the birds because the larger mullion helps break up the space, but that's another way to kind of manipulate the design of the building to meet the ordinance. So I guess it's kind of subjective whether 5% is too much to be adding on to buildings for this. To me, I guess it's not a significant amount, especially when there's other ways to kind of manipulate the design. And if you know going in that this is on our books and this is what you would need to do, then you can kind of plan ahead and break up these glass areas a little bit more. So,
Which maybe accomplishes the goal by having an ordinance on the books that they would change they would work around either putting bird safe glass up, or they would modify their design, which then also accomplishes bird
Some of the same
safety.
objectives, yeah.
Questions, comments, discussion? You push the button first. Go ahead, Alex.
Paper, scissors. I think I said it before. I mean, I like the idea. The whole purpose is good. I don't like creating an ordinance that compels the construction technique where it doesn't exactly, it doesn't revolve around public safety. I don't know that we have anything around this. I think we do the right things, protect the environment. I think that's all part of that, the stormwaters. I mean, strong recommendations during design phase. I think a lot of that, we talk about aesthetics and different things that we want to see, and that we do now. And I think we can add this part to that conversation. The other thing I kind of think about is like continued maintenance. So like your window gets replaced and it doesn't have it, or if a current business replaces a window, do they need to do it? So like this sort of after the fact maintenance and enforcement just sort of kind of gets a little ugly there, or well, it gets sticky because we just don't have the staff for that. A lot of times we put stuff together and we don't have code enforcement, and we're a good community that and we have good developers that follow our guidance already. I like it. I just don't. I'm not in favor of just the ordinance aspect of it. Everything else sounds really good though. I think there's, the cranes walk by the house. All this stuff is happening in this residential environment that I don't think would have occurred if there wasn't good stewardship. And I think this contributes to that. I'm nervous on the strict ordinance side of it. Thanks.
I align very strongly with Alex's statements there. I think enforcing it through ordinance is not the way for us to approach it. A 5% increase on $1 million building, that's approaching a material difference in the cost. And while we're looking to attract businesses into the village, I don't think this helps us with that goal, and I think is vital to the long-term growth of our village. And saving birds is a very noble cause, but I don't think that helps us get to where we need to be as a community. I think I would be in support of more voluntary options and encouraging businesses to adopt these practices. But I would not, I think, at this time support an ordinance for that purpose.
Thanks. I guess my question's for Aaron. Are there places that have more of a voluntary type of incentive for these kinds of, like a LEED, do municipalities, is this part of any LEED designation, or are there like outside organizations that endorse, or something that we could endorse as like
Yeah, if it's,
buildings?
one area where we would have more control is if it's something in a TIF district and they're asking for an incentive, this is something we could, link to an increased incentive. We could have some kind of information packet or something when someone applies for a site plan that these are best practices, but they're not necessarily in an ordinance. There's different ways we can go about it.
It's like we have like a light ordinance that you can't spill off, but then there's also dark skylights. Is that part of our ordinance or requirements, or is that is?
The fixtures can't
Right.
shine up. Yeah.
But that's also for the neighbors, in addition to the environment, is kind of a
Right.
twofold. Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion?
I guess I agree with John and Alex. John was said it very well, so.
So I think the commission, what I'm hearing is not in favor of developing an ordinance, but perhaps in favor of some educational or some outreach. We can obviously build out our website. You can provide developers with information, and I know like the South Central Bird Alliance can help with a lot of those resources too. I think that's a way we could go.
Maybe just one more idea to throw out there. I can't remember the young lady's name who brought this, Ally, thank you. Perhaps something if businesses choose to voluntarily adopt these practices, the village could perhaps recognize them with the Ally, bird champion, and they can hang a nice plaque. I would be fully in support of something like that where it's voluntary and we're still recognizing the important work that she's doing, because being good stewards of our environment is incredibly important. And I don't want to dismiss the hard work that she put into it. So if the
a good
village
idea.
would consider something like that, I would support that wholeheartedly.
We can give that feedback back to her.
She
too.
does still get her award.
Yes, she did receive her gold award, and actually, she was just in the news last week, and they bird safe glassed the front of a Madison Parks building. So, it's continuing. If there's no more discussion on this one, we can move on to discuss potential elimination of minimum parking requirements. There were 4 required readings in your packet, and I would invite Trustee Stowe up to kind of lead this conversation because this is his item. His memo was the 4th one.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the previous thing because it kind of dovetails nicely with what I'm talking about, and you guys not wanting to create an ordinance that forces people to spend more than they might otherwise have to, which is what we do right now with our parking minimum mandates. So I'm just going to read off my script here. This is the first in what I hope to be a series of code changes aimed at, among other things, affordability. This would eliminate government parking mandates in the village. And I want to start off by first stating what this is not. It's not eliminating parking. It's not telling anyone that they have to decrease the amount of parking that they have, and it is not telling anyone that they have to redevelop their parking lot. What this is starting to bring the village code into the 21st century. Property owners go through a lot of due diligence when developing their properties. They have a business model or a home building plan that they go over extensively when they are getting ready to build. They're well aware of the cost of their project and the parameters they need to meet in order to make their businesses, home, or property successful. The Village of Cottage Grove should not undermine their efforts by forcing them to build more parking spots than they might deem necessary. Forced minimum parking mandates mean that a business may have to either buy more land or shrink the size of their planned development to meet an arbitrary stall requirement. That can cost a lot more money, either in upfront costs or in reduced income due to a smaller business footprint. The village should let property owners decide for themselves how much parking they need in order to help their business survive. Parking affects a lot of everyday life. It determines the size and shape, it determines the size, shape, and cost of new buildings, the fate of old ones, the patterns of traffic, viability of transit, life of public space, character of neighborhoods, and the village budget. There's no denying the need for parking spaces, especially somewhere like Cottage Grove, which is heavily car dependent. But we must also examine what too much parking caused by parking mandates can lead to. A 2026 UCLA meta-analysis of parking mandate research, which is one of the things that was in the packet, that analysis indicates that the parking minimums do the following: raise rents and home prices by increasing the cost of construction, reduces housing development, increases driving and traffic congestion, contributes to parcel and building vacancies when they prevent new uses, reduces commercial development density, reduces land values, limits property tax revenue potential, contributes to urban heat, contributes to water pollution, flooding, and habitat degradation, and undermines walkability and degrades urban design. That same meta-analysis also indicates that eliminating parking mandates works. Eliminating minimums enables the construction of more housing, the development of smaller, more affordable homes, more active street fronts, and more infill, which helps to reduce sprawl. Eliminating parking minimums can slow the growth of new parking, but it does not generally lead to developers ceasing to build new parking on new construction. Simply put, we should entrust property owners to evaluate how much parking they need, not mandate it based on nothing but gut feelings. Letting property owners decide for themselves might not change how they operate, but it could. Letting people build smaller, more affordable developments saves homeowners and business owners money, helps preserve farmland, and prevents sprawl, lessens runoff, and pollution. Getting rid of parking mandates is a free market decision that is pro-business, pro-affordability, pro-infill, pro-sustainability, and pro-environment. Thank you.
All right. And this is just for discussion tonight. So open it up to commission members for discussion on the elimination of minimum parking requirements. Future agenda items would then there'd have to be a public hearing and a plan commission. So just putting that out there as how the process would work. But who wants to go first? Alex? No. Okay.
I think especially with what sounds likely to be the stormwater utility being put into place, this will help give both businesses and residents a lot more flexibility in responding to the potential increase that they might be looking at in fees. You know, you think of Piggly Wiggly, and I don't think I've ever seen more than 15 cars in the parking lot, where there's significantly more parking spaces than that, except for when we have our marketplace days, which is phenomenal. But removing some of that, turning it back into green space, I think gives the property owners a lot more flexibility. But then again, thinking of the environmental impact, you know, that reduces heat sink. It has a lot of potential benefits. On the flip side, one thing I am concerned about is, as we are trying to attract businesses and we don't control a lot of the roadways within the village, is there the potential that we might see businesses coming in and then have, you know, more clogged streets where now we have some pedestrian or bicycle safety concerns, because now there's a lot of parking on the shoulders versus in the parking spaces. So I'm a little bit mixed on if I would support an outright removal of the ordinance versus a dramatic reduction. And so that's kind of just my thoughts for now, is very in support of reducing whatever the minimum is right now, for a variety of reasons, in particular with the Stormwater Commission or utility coming on. But I think before removing it outright, doing some studies on what, if any, potential safety issues there might be if it were to be just completely eliminated outright. Yeah. Thanks.
Chris, do you maybe want to respond to what the literature says about cities that have removed or eliminated minimum parking requirements, and what that has actually shown?
Yeah, for the most part, eliminating the minimums doesn't lead to municipalities with new development that doesn't have any parking. They still try to meet the market. The only place that you really see them not doing parking is in dense urban cores like Seattle or London or things like that, that are super walkable and you don't really need parking. But for suburban areas like us, they're still going to meet the market demand, and still, even in places that have eliminated them, I think, I'm trying to remember the exact figures, but if you consider sufficient parking to be a lot that's 85% full, even places that have that still only fill 65% of their parking lot. And even in areas that are considered, I don't remember if they have a parking shortage, they still are only, I think they're only 45% full on their parking lots. So it doesn't, none of the literature that I've read, and I've read a lot, shows that there's a ton of spillover onto public on-street parking stalls.
Yeah, I'll just add page 50 of one of the reports showed that the commercial developments still provide more, like at least the minimum, if not more, parking based on their own analysis.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's not necessarily intended to eliminate parking. It's not intended to eliminate parking. It's letting the businesses decide that. A lot of the parking requirements right now, they're not based on health or safety or science. They're kind of just, people just came up with them because it seemed good in the 50s. And then one town did it and the other town saw them do it and they're like, well, let's do that as well. So they're not really based on anything sound. It's kind of just vibes. So I think just letting businesses decide for themselves what there should be is really the best way to go. And, you know, some people are going to say, what if they don't build enough parking? And I think that's a legitimate concern. What if they don't build enough parking? But there's other considerations too, like what if they don't hire enough staff? What if their building isn't big enough for the demand they meet? What if their hours aren't long enough for people to come there? There's a lot of decisions that go into starting and operating a business. And generally, we leave that to the businesses to figure out how that works, except for parking. I mean, it would be like us having an ordinance that would say groceries and pharmacies have to stay open 24/7 because, you know, some people work third shift. And just like parking places, people need groceries and they need medicine. So you guys have to stay open 24 hours. Doesn't make much sense to me.
Can I ask you a question then? You also chair the housing chapter committee. And I was wondering if you could, like I see this as being kind of an outcome of the work that committee has done over the last year. I think affordability was one of the top KPIs that came out of the study, and how can we do a better job in the village? And I think obviously like the stack of books
Yeah.
and all of the attachments show that if you want to do something, you know, increase affordability, eliminating parking minimums is actually one good way to do that.
Yeah, so a lot of the people that I've talked to, builders, realtors, things like that, the two biggest concerns they have are materials costs and land costs. Those are the two biggest drivers of housing affordability, and we can't really legislate those, but we can allow people to build smaller so they don't have to use less material and they don't have to use as much land. So this is just one facet of allowing developers to build a little smaller, and that's going to help people who currently can't downsize into the village and age in place. It could help recent graduates. It could help you know, empty nesters, seniors, be able to have a smaller footprint property. And you know, there's a lot of we are a car-centric village, but there are some people who don't drive. I talked to some people at Drumlin Reserve who are frustrated because they don't drive and they have to go to Piggly Wiggly to get their groceries, and you know, it's a mile and a half away. They're not going to walk there, so that's an added cost because they don't have a car. So if you know, somebody wanted to build a small grocery store that's near there that they could actually get to, and they don't necessarily need to have. I mean, if I'll use Piggly Wiggly as an example, and it's only as a visual example. I don't want anyone to think that I'm trying to tell Piggly Wiggly what to do. But if you look at the parking lot there, or you know, pretty much any business in the village, you look at the lot, it's usually, or like Jimmy John's too, it's like 30% building, you know, 50% parking, and then the rest is, you know, stormwater or grass or whatever. So it's just, it's generally not a very good productive use of land. And it doesn't even have to be reserved for extra development too. As John was saying, it could just be, you know, they could just reserve it as green space, and then if they need a bigger parking lot, they can pave it over in the future. But it's just, and he's right, we were just talking extensively in Utility and Public Works about efforts to decrease impermeable surfaces in the village, and this could be a good way to do that.
I also think it would give developers an opportunity to turn some of that space that would be parking lot into, you know, a green strip with a sidewalk that goes from Cottage Grove Road or any of the larger roads straight up to the building, and you can have people who are going to walk places have a safe way to access the building, as
Yeah, I mean,
opposed
you
to
could
like
build
traversing a wide open parking
Like
lot.
a civic strip or something with a fountain in there that people could just mill around or sit in. Yeah, it could be anything like that. But I mean, it's just, you know, and a lot of what I hear about going through campaigns is people want to maintain that small town feel. And I think that if you look at some of the bigger cities around us, huge swaths of parking lot is not a road that I would like to go down, no pun intended. I mean, if you look at Grand Avenue in Sun Prairie, it's building, and then just a huge swath of parking lot. If you look at the malls, obviously nobody goes to malls anymore. It's a small building surrounded by a sea of parking. If you go down Cottage Grove Road there's a Pizza Hut down there, and it's got 34 stalls for Pizza Hut, and the Pizza Hut is delivery and carry out only. They do not need 34 stalls for that. And that's, you know, I don't want to take the village in that direction. I would prefer to keep it, you know, more compact. And it, you know, it's another thing that'll help infill too, because right now, if you have a a vacant building that was one use, and if you want to switch it to another use, it might have different parking requirements, so you might have to increase the parking, and you might not be able to take that building and do the business that you want to do because you'd have to build more parking, and it's just maybe not in the budget.
One other item for the commission to consider too is if we did away with this and we find ourselves with smaller parking lots, that's probably going to mean less salt usage in the wintertime, of which, you know, obviously we spend a significant amount of our year. And that's been brought up again and again by the DNR, the amount of salt that's ending up in our waterway. And fresh water's going to be an ever more precious resource as we move into the future. But one other item to consider, you know, I look at Johnson Health Tech across from Kids Safari down that way, and they don't have enough parking. And in my opinion, that was creating a safety issue when we were attending Kids Safari, kind of pulling out. It got a little dicey at times, especially in the busier hours. So I wonder if there have been ordinances for larger businesses like that, where they are going to have a routine pattern of life with kind of a set number of folks to absorb that, so we don't see so much parking on the streets, which is going to increase the village's maintenance and repair costs, those safety issues that we see there. Have you seen any ordinances similar to that, where it's maybe the larger businesses, and I'm thinking of Amazon too, where they don't, in the absence of those ordinances, take advantage of that lack of ordinance and then abuse that lack thereof?
I haven't seen too much. One option that I've heard of, and it's not much I've read about, I wouldn't by any means call myself an expert in it, is municipality could go to like residential permits, so residents are able to park free on street parking. But if you get people coming in for your downtown or whatever, you'd have to pay to go on it to try to lower the number of non-resident people who are parking on the streets. I don't know the history behind Johnson Health Tech building their parking lot there. Obviously, I think anyone who goes there can see that they don't have enough parking. I don't know a good solution for them besides building more, and I don't even know if because as I recall, they own a lot right by Dolphin Swim. I don't even know if that's enough space for them to fit all their cars. Yeah, I don't know.
I got 2 sheets. Here we go. Good conversation. I think the word I heard a lot in the conversation earlier here is comparing to a city. We're not a city. We're a destination. In order to facilitate that destination, people are driving here, and it's parking. Even if we get that bus stop someday, it will be a bus stop. It will not be a network to navigate us through the spaces. It won't be a bus from the reserve to here, to the pig, or anything like that. We don't have a lot of high-density properties where I take the elevator downstairs and I'm at a coffee shop. I'm getting in my car, I need to go somewhere. So we talk about standards, we talked about the birds earlier. You know, this is kind of a safety issue with cars. The conversation around the pig, I got to jump around my notes, make sure I think. The pig review, I mean, is interesting, right? So it's the biggest landmark that we all see. So that's why we're comparing it. In all fairness, we're not beating up the pig. This is not, but it's that was created at a certain point in time. And I think what's done a lot to these businesses like this is really the online shopping. And so more cars now having to park in a street is preventing these other trucks from navigating and getting through the spaces. So I think just to say that, hey, the Piggly Wiggly has available spaces, it's been a platform change. Was science used in creating what we have now? And I don't know I'm sure there is a degree in parking lotting, but those numbers, we've been on this committee for quite a bit, and we've reviewed these quite a bit. Staff has brought a lot of recommendations to us. There has been multiple comparisons to other communities. To say that it was just sort of ad hoc or willy-nilly, there was no science put together, I think there was a lot of thought put into what we currently already do. And businesses that need a variance, the dog daycare, I think was, I think of Steel, I don't remember, but I remember having conversations because it's like, hey, it's a big warehouse, we only have 25 people, why do we need all this parking? We have conversations around it. There's mechanisms for businesses to say, hey, my model isn't this, let's have a conversation. And there is a process for that. If we just delete parking requirements, it's going to become, it will become a free-for-all. It'll be an avenue for cost reductions for sure. I mean, I think there's all those side effects there. But the control that we lose is pretty good. Cars are bigger than people, right? So if I go get my sandwich at the sandwich shop, I'm a very small person and I stand a little square inside that building. However, my car takes up 8 by 4 feet of space, and that's a bit why they're bigger. And I think a lot of businesses are actually looking on how to leverage the space for multiple uses, right? The Dunkin' Donuts is a strip. They're sort of saying, hey, we're going to aggregate this one building. This one is really bigger at breakfast, and this one's more interested in dinners, and so they're sort of leveraging it, and I think they're doing a lot of good stuff there. You mentioned salt. That's a good one, too, because as cars potentially get pushed into the streets, we have alternate side parking. Now, granted, that's at night, and there's some things around there. But I think once we get into winter months, alternate side parking, the idea of me going to a coffee shop, I want to be close to that door. I don't want to park down the street. There's a Mexican restaurant I go to in Stoughton. It's right across from the Quick Trip, and their parking lot's tiny. So we end up parking down the street in the residential area, and we walk to it. It works. It will work. However, if they had a bigger, parking lot, I'd certainly be closer to the door in the rain. So I do think about alternate side parking. A couple more things here. If we want less parking, we could apply for a variance. I also think it could potentially be a little short-sighted. So my need today is nobody visits me. Everything's just, I have the UPS truck and that's all I need. So I only need a little loading dock. However, my business grows and I leave, and now the next person, I need at least 5 spots. It's just not there. And so I think there's a future state where we're also trying to help carve the look and feel of what we're doing here in Cottage Grove. And I think the big driver, somewhere for the requirements. Okay, well, something we should be talking about, or could be also talking about with parking. So there's a bonus here. And I'm going to mention the city. So Madison did this. Like when you remodel stuff and you add certain amount of parking spaces, they're requiring, I think, Aaron, if I know the right word, electric charging. And I think, as a destination, that range anxiety, knowing that they can come and visit, they can go to the parks, and there's a place to plug in. I think that is an interesting thing to talk about. I don't know if it's something we would require, something we would strongly suggest. We would get into that sort of phase. But electric charging is out there, and I don't think we have any high-speed chargers in the village, and I think those would be beneficial even for residents. From like, hey, I got range anxiety, I got to fill this thing up, I got to get to the fireside for my dinner, and they can plug in, they can do it. So I there's mechanisms for businesses to come in and reduce. We did it with the library board. It didn't exist. The library, that was the proposal, sorry, not really the library proposal, and we had great conversation around it, and we came up with a proposal that fit the space, but also knowing that there is no ability to do on-street parking on that road. So there had to have been a compromise. With zero parking, a business can go in there and really create, I think, issues for us. So I think it's good conversation. I think it's worthy business by business, case by case. I don't think we can unilaterally strike parking because it's going to be harder to go back and get back into it. And I think the process does work. We've had conversations with businesses saying, hey, I don't need this. This is a barrier. This is a but-for. What can we do? And we work it out with them. So I'm good where we're at. If there's studies that says our numbers are plus minus 1 or 2 here, I think that's just sort of noise in the system, and we work with them. I'd like to see cases potentially of where a village, not a city, a village is struggling. We're just wide. I mean, if you're going to, I'm not a biker. I know you are, and it's awesome. But I don't see a lot of businesses putting a lot of the bike stands out. Maybe they'll get into that. But we're doing a lot of work now with the paths, and the multi-use path that you got that's being done over there is phenomenal. That was a huge project that I know we talked about even here as Heyday was going in. Who's going to connect from the school back to Heyday? And now it's being done, and it's awesome, right? So I just don't think we're there yet. We're not a city. We don't have the density, and I wouldn't touch our numbers. That's my spiel.
So a few things about that. Smallest municipality in Wisconsin that has eliminated their parking mandates is Gilman, population 444. As far as businesses not building bike stands yet, that's kind of a chicken egg situation. You know, maybe they'll build more if they get the opportunity. Variances and all that is, you know, it's a subjective standard. It can be used as a weapon if a board or committee wanted to. I'd prefer to not have that option there. And the library discussion about changing the minimums there, it was, some people were saying 13, some people were saying 15. None of that was based on anything besides that's what I feel like it should be. There's no science behind this. It's all based on what people feel like they should have for parking. And a lot of this conversation has been, we're talking about on-street parking and, you know, salt and all that. That's all assuming that these places that build are not going to build enough parking. And I don't think that's something that we can assume because it hasn't been borne out by any of the research that I've read. They understand that right now Cottage Grove is car dependent. They're not going to have 8 spaces for a grocery store because they know that they're not going to get enough people in to let their business survive. I had another thought and it went away.
You're on
Go
track.
ahead.
You're on track. I think you're on track. I don't have. I'm not going to arm wrestle you because I think all the thoughts and the research and the homework is there. My point is you didn't convince me yet, which is fine.
Okay.
But we're not going to arm wrestle. We're not going to go out and have. I mean, I think there's a lot of homework, a lot of good stuff going on there. And I think there will be a point where we get to a mass transit situation where we be able to create the walking destinations. I think the parking lot at the Piggly Wiggly is the one that strikes us all the most of like, hey, it's overfull. But then you talk about Johnson Health Tech and you're like, man, that's not a good safe situation right there. And we don't want to be there either. I know what you're saying about sort of it's the whim or the will of the boards or whatever, but I think that's where our sounding board of staff brings information to us as well. Yeah, maybe there is a degree in parkology. We'll have to put an ology at the end of it. But anyway, I'm with you. I just don't want to drag things back.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, there is a institute funded that at UCLA that is dedicated researchers to the issue of parking across America. So there is a lot of science behind it. It's pretty awesome.
Do you have Donald Shoup's book there? Yeah, if you want to read 700 pages about parking, that's your book.
It takes maybe like a weekend.
Yeah, okay.
No big deal.
So we've talked about Piggly Wiggly. When Piggly Wiggly was built, Metro Market wasn't up the street, there wasn't a Woodman's. Online shopping wasn't available. When Johnson Health Tech was built, the bicycle industry wasn't, COVID hit and they exploded. So I think having a minimum, it kind of keeps the middle there. Like we do have the extremes, but I feel like we have a lot in the middle that it just kind of fits just right. So I don't know that eliminating 80% of what works for 20% of what is outdated, I don't know.
I think that this is going to come up in the comp plan as well too. Maybe it works for what we are right now, but it's not necessarily going to work into the future. Removing things like this and other things that you'll probably hear from me later gives us the flexibility going forward to change, because we all know that You know, this place doesn't look like it did 5, 10, 20 years ago. And if we can give the code some flexibility, it's going to be a lot easier to let businesses, homes, the village as a whole grow and expand and mature.
I know it's not part of this discussion, but kind of something that's really important to me and ties in a way is, you know, if we were to, the board were to move forward with some type of ordinance or changing the code to get rid of the parking, and we're talking about giving property owners flexibility in what they do with their properties, something in the realm of the covenants that are getting put in place for the residential developments. You know, there's 3 large developers that essentially have locked the vast majority of the residents here into what they can and can't do with their property. And I am very open to giving property owners more flexibility over what they do with the property that they own and are paying taxes on again and again, and maybe moving away from kind of legacy businesses controlling the overarching feel of our community. So in that regard, I would support that as part of a larger effort to move away from restrictions on what property owners do.
It's one of the things I've been looking into. I've had some conversations with Rick about it. There's not much we can do about covenants that are already in place, since those are private contracts. Rick and I don't see eye to eye on future contracts yet. It's not something I've been able to circle back with him on it yet, but I think there's a way to do it. But I'm also not an attorney, so I'll keep talking with him about it.
Well,
And
Rick's
that's not
not
right.
here, so this is your chance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think it's in order for the motion tonight.
I have mixed feelings as well on the whole parking thing, and, you know, everyone's already cited the obvious. You know, Piggly Wiggly doesn't own that. You know, someone built that center and leased it to Piggly Wiggly, their space. But I agree, there's too much parking there and not used. Probably has been pretty much the whole time, but then we have Johnson Health Tech. But, you know, 40 years of working with developers, I can tell you they're not always gonna look out for the best interest of the community, or sometimes even their tenants. They're gonna do it on the cheap, I promise you that. And even, you know, we talk about Jimmy John's, I don't think there's too much parking there. And somehow they couldn't quite add another foot or 2 feet, because every time I go around that drive-through, all you gotta do is look at all the black marks on that curb right there and the big mud hole on the other side of the curb when my truck and everyone else's car goes over that curb. So they don't always look in the best interest of the community, or, you know, there's good developers and then there's developers that are not so good. And
Yeah,
I've ran into more that are not so good than I have that are good over the years.
I don't know about business, but from what I've read for residential, it's actually more profitable for the developer to have parking spots, because that means they're going to get in people who are able to afford cars and they can afford a higher rent.
I appreciate this coming forward, because I do think that maybe some of the things we need to look at from a different perspective, like the heat island effect, stormwater. We have, bigger, stronger storms than we've had in the past, and how are we going to, infiltrate that water in the middle of urban areas when it's basically paved over? And then at the same time, I think about accessibility, especially for seniors who can't get around easily. Maybe they can't walk from, where they live to what they're going to get. So I'm not sold on getting rid of minimums altogether. I would very much like to revisit thinking under this lens of, what is the best fit for us going forward and what we want to be, and making sure that, it's not a barrier for a business to open or something to be built and infill development. So I think maybe looking at the parking through, through a different process might be, something that I'm more willing to start with than getting rid of altogether.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. One thing to note is that developers would still have to follow fire code and ADA and federal regulations like that. When it comes down to it, it's still, the thing that I personally can't get past is that there's no real science behind, you're reducing it to what level and why. There's no, like, what do you bring it down to and what's the reasoning behind that? There's like no, that I've seen no public safety or health or any reasons behind that besides this feels right. So I get it. Parking is a funny topic. Everybody wants parking.
But then we wanted to narrow our roads too in our residential. So we want to narrow our roads and then add more parking on our roads. So then that does start to become a safety concern,
I think research shows that it slows cars down, which is the whole point.
Yeah.
That was in the book too.
The 30-mile-an-hour scooters zipping past the house right now have not slowed down at all.
They better be wearing a helmet.
And we made a bigger path for them between places, yeah.
You can talk to people that live in parts of Madison with narrow streets and all that, and it doesn't necessarily slow people down, I mean, we think it might, but not necessarily, But right now, we gotta figure out how to slow the kids on the scooters and everything else down, because that's totally out of control.
I saw Chief Lang and some ambulances over by School Road and a scooter on its side and a child teen
Yeah,
getting taken into an ambulance. So, yeah,
not good.
I don't disagree with that. I don't have a bunch of books that I've read about scooters though. So.
But even the stormwater, sometimes I think as a business owner, looking to try to finish developing a chunk of land, I think sometimes that some of the stormwater ordinances are overkill, Seriously, if you really dive into them. I mean, if forever you've never been able to discharge water off of your developed land at any greater of a rate than it was before development. I mean, that's been forever. But then we start adding more and more layers of, ponds and everything else. Especially when, like where I'm at, there is a giant detention pond, just one business over that was meant for the whole development. And we have that in our business park. So we have it where we do have one, and we've let some businesses not have as much water retention because of the soil type. Whereas sometimes, okay, you don't have the right soil, well, you're gonna have to pay to dig out that soil and truck in this special soil. So, I mean, we can look at a lot of different things other than just parking, that
I have a long
is
list
a
of things I'm
burden.
going to be looking at. So
Yeah, but I mean,
Parking is
that's a
first.
huge burden,
Yeah.
and the civil engineering, just to figure it out is over the top, where people are, like me, I've held off, adding anything more to what I would like to do, just
Yeah.
because of the burden and the cost of that, so.
Okay. Any other discussion on parking?
Aaron, like everyone said, we have revisited this multiple times over the years, and, every time, I think at one point we were probably the strictest, and we loosened it up, and, I think we can continue, just like we talked about, looking at it and revisiting it. So, like I said, I think there's a happy medium somewhere, but I don't think we should just get rid of it. It's like asking your kids if they want to do chores. It's going to be no. But, I think we could revisit it again, but we still need a minimum standard of some sort.
It might be worth looking into some way to add flexibility, like if they provide some kind of analysis that this is why I think I need half the spaces that are required by the ordinance, and it makes sense to us based on the location or how the building's getting used, we can allow that reduction or something like that.
And I think we've done that. We have done that. I mean, I don't want to see a parking lot if we don't need it. It doesn't make sense.
I mean, to me, that just adds another step that is unnecessary. If they're going to come to us and say, can we do that? Can we do fewer? And we say yes, we should just let
Yeah, I mean, they're
them, let
doing
them
it.
build it in the first
They do it
place.
now. I mean, we had a proposal for the brewery, which came through twice, as, hey, what do you think of this? I really wanted that rooftop terrace. And we liked that. And then they came in. I think it's part of the process. I mean, it gives, I mean, if they came back and they said, hey, we're gonna build a brewery and we're not gonna give any parking, and then we have no recourse. I mean, that is the duty of the team, to be good stewards of the village. And again, it's back into the extremes. What's the likelihood of that happening? No, because they want parking, right? But it's, that possibility is how these committees and why these committees are here, I think. But, yeah, we adjust and adapt all of the ordinances. We do sort of follow Dane County. The village is getting bigger, the village is getting, other things are getting closer to us, and we adapt, but.
Anything to add, Aaron?
Would you like me to do anything?
Motion to do that.
I mean,
This is, right now, this is just discussed.
Discussion, and we already, at the village board level, we had the attorney drafting language, so.
So there'll be a public hearing at the next plan commission with language, and then an actual consider.
We're not approving a public hearing at this point. We're not moving forward with anything. We're just discussing the potential, and we haven't moved forward with authorizing staff to do, well, the board could, I guess. So the board is authorized moving forward, so why are we even here?
Yeah, exactly.
No, we talked
was-
about it last, what was that, last Monday?
So the board's moved forward with it.
To move it to plan commission.
Yeah,
But we
this-
didn't have time to get onto this.
There's no
agenda.
discuss and
Right.
consider, so we're not even, the plan, as far as, yeah, we have nothing here to move motion to authorize.
There's no motion for tonight.
Right,
It's just discussion.
but the next meeting shouldn't have a public hearing. We're not even, this group is not in alignment with moving forward with reducing minimums.
Well, what we set forward at the village board was to draft the language, have a informational discussion tonight, and at a future plan commission, have a public hearing for the public to weigh in as well. And I would imagine there would be a consider on that, and
So we would have to see the draft language. We're not even close to a public hearing. So the next meeting, potentially, if we're talking about it, would be drafted language. And if it's already authorized, then Aaron, there's nothing for us to tell you to do or not do, because the board has already told somebody to do something.
Yeah, we're supposed to be doing that. So you guys are kind of just going by us.
Process is out the window.
Generally, the commission's votes are not binding on the board, though. We generally forward recommendations to the board. And so we could say, hey, we recommend not going forward this, and the board could tell us to kick rocks, and they're gonna vote with maybe the feedback from the rest of the community. So
They've done
it's
that.
not necessarily out of order. The board can say, hey, we maybe wanna propose a new ordinance, pass it to the plan commission to get their feedback and their thoughts for the role that we're here for. But ultimately, we're passing forward recommendations, so I don't believe they're necessarily out of order.
I don't think we're out of order, and this will come back to the village board on Monday as just during the reporting. So they'll have this feedback, and then any future feedback that happens at a future meeting.
So what's that feedback gonna look like?
Like, what am I gonna say on Monday? I don't know
The
yet.
board does, the plan commission is not, well, there's no vote, so I don't want to speak for anyone. Don't think I'm speaking for you. But the board, we had a discussion, but there's no direction because we don't even have language to even
Yeah, I'm
help
just
guide
I usually
board,
give a
right?
report on what happens. I take pretty extensive notes.
Yeah, I
And
know.
yeah.
Okay.
And if anyone's unhappy with the way I'm reporting, like, please send me an email and let me know as well. But, all right, future agenda items. Aaron, I'm not sure if anything else is coming down.
Yep, Grafe will be here at the next meeting to talk about comp plan stuff. There's a church that's looking at a piece of land in the village that will be coming in for a conditional use permit either next month or the month after. Another potential business concept plan. I think we're gonna have a 0 lot line. I think those are the items for the next meeting. And then I'll also point out, Grafe, our consultant with the comp plan, will be at Community Night Out next Wednesday, I believe. They'll have a booth there to engage with the public about comp plan issues. Then we're going to have an open house right here on September 3rd from 5:30 to 7 for people to come in and have some interactive booths and things. So you're all welcome and encouraged to come and participate and engage with people also.
Thanks.
And we're still on track for the second Wednesday? You're not moving next month? We're good?
Oh yeah, it
Okay.
would be for the next meeting date is
12th. Nope,
Wrong
that's
month.
today.
September 9th.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay. Number 9,
Motion to adjourn.
motion and second, non-debatable. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.